graduate of UNLV, Boyd School of Law. I practice law at the Clark County Public Defender's Office. I work in the juvenile division. I represent children. I'm also an elected member of the state legislature. I represent State Senate District 21, which is here in Southern Nevada, up in Carson City. Look forward to your presentation.
All right, go ahead and introduce yourselves.
I'm Daisy Ruiz-Herrera, and I'm happy to be here.
I'm Alex Banker, and I'm also happy to be here.
I'm Natalie Appling, and we are Unit 2 from Reed High School.
Okay, awesome. All right, here we go. I'm going to read the question in its entirety. Okay. Today we're going to ask the question, how did the framers create the Constitution? Right? And there's two parts to this. What were the key controversies and challenges faced during the Confederation period under the Articles of Confederation? Discuss how these issues contributed to the eventual call for a new Constitution. Bullet point 1. In your estimation, have assessments of the Articles of Confederation been overly critical? Explain your answer. If you were to propose revisions to the Articles of Confederation, what specific changes would you suggest to address? The issues of the period to ensure the document's long-term success. You may start when you're ready.
George Washington, writing to Madison in 1786, said, 13 sovereignties all pulling against each other and tugging at the federal head will soon bring ruin to the whole. Washington, alongside Madison, Hamilton, and other Federalists, had many legitimate concerns about the Articles of Confederation.
The nation had an ill-equipped, poorly financed 700-member army for protection. The British occupied the Great Lakes forts they had promised to leave after the war. Spain closed the Mississippi, occupied American land, and encouraged Indian raids on the frontier settlements. The federal government could not force the states to honor treaties or successfully manage the horde of barbaric pirates that plagued the coastline.
Under the Articles of Confederation, states fought over commerce, currency, taxes, and borders. Under Article 8, Congress could only request funds from self-interested states. They could not pay soldiers who had fought or pay back merchants who had donated goods. In 1786, the nation's income was less than 1/3 of the interest due on debt. New York and Pennsylvania both taxed goods going to New Jersey, which Benjamin Franklin compared to a keg tapped at both ends.
Congress could not enforce taxation. They asked for $1.5 million to pay back war debts and only received way under what they asked for. Congress therefore could not pay soldiers, leaving many citizens poor and perpetuating a cycle of indebted people and government. This left unpaid soldiers enraged, which contributed to Shays' Rebellion, further concerning leaders about security under the Articles.
Possibly the greatest defect that impeded the development of the national government was the inability to amend the Articles. Each state had one vote in Congress. At least 9 states had to agree to ratify a motion, and any change under the Articles required a unanimous ratification from all state legislatures, which proved impossible.
Assets alluding to the Articles of Confederation as a failure are overly critical. There were several positive achievements, including drafting the Articles, which meant the United States could officially be recognized as a country. Another achievement was Congress's ability to create executive departments to manage finance, foreign relations, and military affairs. Though the Articles of Confederation did not establish a judicial branch, it did establish admiralty courts.
The Land Ordinance of 1785 and Northwest Ordinance of 1787 prohibited slavery in the Northwest Territories, required education to be funded by setting aside land to be sold, and established a process for admitting new states. Equality of new states prevented the new republic from immediately colonizing and becoming an empire. Congress was able to do this because it was the first area which they had complete control over. The Revolutionary War ended through the Treaty of Paris, thus teaching the country how to conclude a war and practice international diplomacy.
The amendments we would suggest for the Articles are based on the ones that were tried from 1781 through 1786. Many of these same issues would resurface later in the Constitutional Convention. There were efforts to collect import duties to support the war and give Congress coercive power over the states. Amendments were proposed to describe privileges and immunities of citizens in each state, define the extradition process, as well as the power to regulate commerce, Indian affairs, postal roads, weights and measures, and establish a mint.
However, these amendments and more all failed to gain the necessary approval of all 13 state legislators. The unanimous consent to amend requirement of the articles made them practically impossible to amend. Ultimately, these powers and others proposed under the articles were incorporated into various parts of the Constitution in 1787.
Thank you.
I just need to look at the ring notes. I'm curious about, you brought up commerce compared to the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution. I'm curious, why wasn't there an ability for taxes to be collected? Can you expound on that during the Articles of compared to the Constitution? Because it's to my belief, early in the Constitution, we didn't really, in America, we didn't have taxes until the 1900s.
Yes, the articles were created in this weak sense because they were afraid of what happened in Great Britain. So they left taxation and funding up to the states, which was seen under Article 6 of the articles.
And they could only request funds from self-interested states, so the states did not have to comply and give them money. So only states that wanted to gave them money.
I believe that one of the speakers mentioned the Northwest Ordinance, and I wonder if you could expand a little bit about the significance of the Northwest Ordinance during the Article of Confederation era.
The Northwest Ordinance helped expand during the Articles of Confederation. It also it set aside land to be sold for funding.
Thank you.
It also established framework for space for new states, as well as expanding land past the Mississippi River.
Excellent, thank you.
So to that point, there was an opportunity to expand and grow. We no longer have that. Do you think that, I'm just thinking California and Texas and Oklahoma and some of those large states, maybe could there be an opportunity? And what would our federalists think about being able to create more states? Or is that a dead subject?
That would be a dead subject because there is no reason to create new states when these states are already established.
In your belief, do you think the Articles of Confederation inspired westward expansion?
Well, Thomas Jefferson made the Louisiana Purchase, which is an extremely influential decision during his time because he didn't need any congressional approval for that decision. And that one decision alone expended so much territory in the West.
One question I have is, if the founders had not adopted the Constitution as we know it now, we'd stuck with the Articles of Confederation, what kind of federal government do you think we would have had? How do you see the relationship between the federal government and states if let's say, they hadn't made that step? We'd stuck under the original Articles of Confederation under our republic.
I would like to argue against the premises of this question because it would have not been possible to last under the Articles of Confederation. They only lasted for a little bit over a decade because they were so unamendable. That's why we had to create this new constitution.
And if we also still had the Articles of Confederation, we would probably still have slavery in the South, because since the Constitution there is clauses about slavery and how we wouldn't deal with them until later in our history, we would still have slavery in the South, and that would kind of greatly different between the North and South, and there would probably still be going on with a Civil War if we didn't get rid of the Articles of Confederation.
And to add on what my colleague was saying, the Three-Fifths Compromise was a mass part of passing the Constitution, which was seen in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3.
And adding on to Daisy's first point, it was wishful thinking to think that we could amend the Articles of Confederation with 13 out of 13, which was established in the Article 13 of the Constitution, or the Articles of Confederation, my bad. In the Constitution, Article 5, at least with 75% of the states and 2/3 majority, it's more reasonable than everybody.
And to go back, when we came up with the Articles of Confederation back in November 15th of 1777, it took a full-on 6 years for even all the states to ratify them, with Maryland being the last state to ratify the Articles of Confederation. So if it took 6 years just for all 13 states to ratify, it would not be possible to have 50 be able to agree on one thing.
Thank you.
What took 6 years to get nowhere? Well, somewhere. But what took so long in those 6 years that made it almost impossible to move forward?
With the Articles of Confederation being ratified,
Yes.
the main thing was the border dispute between Maryland, is that they were just, they didn't want to, they were disputing over a border with a different state. And it was the main thing that they didn't want to ratify the Articles of Confederation.
This tug of war that we see with the Articles of Confederation versus the Constitution, people who want, states to have more power versus a strong national government. Do you see that tug of war, that tension now, current affairs, modern times? Do you see that happening? And if so, what if you could expound about that?
Absolutely, through gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is when senators draw district lines across states for a advantage for their political party. You can absolutely see this today because with our House of Representatives, only 50 to 70% of the seats are truly competitive, where other seats just sit back.
And another major difference is that the states themselves in the Articles of Confederation handled interstate commerce between the states themselves and didn't leave it up to the federal government. Where in the Constitution, under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 2, or Clause 3, interstate commerce is left up to Congress and the federal government. So now states don't work with each other as much. That can be seen in the West here with California, Nevada, and Oregon. We all rely on the Colorado River, except we're not working with each other to utilize the Colorado River effectively. We're leaving it up to the state, the federal government, because it's an interstate commerce issue.
This could also be seen in US v. Thornton, where states wanted congressional term limits, but this was not left up to the states. There would need to be an additional amendment.
And they would have to go through the Article 5, the amendment process.
And this partisanship and tug of war is also pressuring presidents to issue out more and more executive orders over time.
Thank you.
So to bring us to current day commerce, does our current President Trump and his idea of tariffs on Mexico and Canada, how do you think that that will impact sovereignty of states to be able to conduct business?
President Trump wanting to issue these tariffs, he shouldn't be able to because he doesn't have the power designated from Article 2. Tariffs or taxes are left up to Article 1, Section 8. That is the legislative's power. It shouldn't be left up to the executive.
To piggyback off that, do you think the Constitution allows for more political power allocated to the president?
With how vague the Article 2 is written in the U.S. Constitution, it's made presidents be able to write executive orders, which are not, there's no clause in Article 2, Section 1 or Section 3 where our executive orders are deprived from. So since of how vague Article 2 is, presidents have taken powers that they deemed for themselves from Article 2, and that can be seen with the executive orders.
For example, when Biden was in his presidency, he tried to forgive $480 billion of student loan debt through Biden v. Nebraska, but he was denied because it was unconstitutional.
You brought up some different cases, and I wonder what you think of the difference between the court system set up under the Constitution versus, the lack of that under the Articles and the role that plays in our government and our republic, the fact that we have our federal courts, our Supreme Court.
Can you restate the question, please?
I just wonder what the role, I wondered if you could expand on the role of the Supreme Court in terms of interpreting law and trying to, decide, who's right when there's a question of the statutory interpretation, whether something's constitutional or not, how that affects our current government. I wonder if you could just speak to that.
Well, back then, the states were honestly more disconnected than we were today. Back under the Articles, they each had different currencies and different rules and regulations, and do you want to expand upon that?
Yeah, so with them all having different currencies, it made it very hard for them to trade with each other and conduct business. But now with Article 1, Section 8, by all being under one coin from Article 1, Section 8, Clause 7 to Clause 5, being able to coin money, it's made it very easy But to go back to your question, the Supreme Court there is supposed to be unbiased, but that's not very true today with it now being a 6-3 conservative court. And this can be seen in multiple different court cases, especially with
And especially disputes were hard to get through since there was not a strong executive head.
Thank you.
I reserve my time for my other judges.
I'm trying to make some connections here, so,
Just to be here is at this level in the state, like the state of Nevada, state competition, I think they're all remarkable. These are easy questions that we're asking out here, right? And you're showing your depth of knowledge and how much background it took you to be able to answer these questions. And that's quite impressive. So I really think you guys did a great job, okay?
I do too, and I like how you shared the responsibility. You didn't even miss a beat, you just kind of, and how you gave it up to your colleagues. That's a real thing. And I will say that I struggled a little bit because you took me to places that I didn't have enough time to think about. It's like, oh my goodness, what question am I going to ask? Because you took me to a place that I wasn't prepared to think how to let you expand on your knowledge. And so I kind of apologize for not really asking good questions. I'm
Coming back
sorry.
from lunch, right?
I really liked the references to history that you made, talking about the Barbary pirates and how, without a national military, how vulnerable our citizens were, and an example of one reason we needed a strong national government. I really liked the discussion about commerce between the state and about how states, we didn't have national regulation of interstate commerce, and states were acting almost like countries, in terms of commerce between the states, tariffs, things like that. And I also, the discussion about, one currency versus states having different currencies is so important now, more than ever, I think, as we talk about, cryptocurrency and digital currencies and things like that are part of this technological revolution. So great job.
That would have been a good question.
Yeah.
All right.